How to Fight a Dragon's Fury is the last book of the series. Why?
No, yes, this is How to Fight a Dragon's Fury, and that was the first one, How to Train Your Dragon, which was, I wrote, my goodness, about 18 years ago. Why? Why finish this series, which I'm still loving writing? The books were inspired by a real place. I grew up in London, in a house without a garden, but my dad was a mad keen bird watcher. He was actually chairman of the RSPB. And so every year from when I was a baby, we'd be taken to this uninhabited island off the west coast of Scotland and dropped off by a local boatman and picked up again 2 weeks later. And there was nothing on the island, no houses, no phones, absolutely no way of contacting the outside world if something went wrong. And this was the first place that the Vikings came to when they invaded Great Britain. So even though the islands had been uninhabited for hundreds of years, there were houses, little ruined houses all over the island where real Vikings would have lived once upon a time. And I used to play in these houses and imagine what would it be like to be a Viking. So that's the inspiration for the series, but the whole series is answering a slightly different question, which is, if dragons existed, where are they now? What happened to the dragons?
So really these books have been in your consciousness since before you can remember, and what might today be considered child abuse, putting a child on an island with no TV, no computer or anything, has actually been the making of you.
I know, and by the time I was 9, my dad had a house built on the island, and then we spent the whole summer there with no telly, so yeah, and still no way of contacting the outside world when anything went wrong. So yes, it was an extraordinary childhood. And my dad's kind of notion of sort of safety over things like going out in storms and things like that. Yeah, he's a very brave person, and I'm a little more like, hang on a second. So yes, all of those emotions went into it. But it was an incredible childhood. And if you're on an island for a month in the summer, you read a lot and you make things up and you make your own entertainment. You get bored. Children today are not bored enough, sometimes I think, because it makes you creative. Boredom makes you creative.
Hiccup's father is a big figure in every way, isn't he? And he's rather overawed by him. Is there something of your own father in him?
My father is very much in Stoic, and Hiccup's relationship with his father, I think that this has been, being a key part of the success of the books and the films, is that children often have this sense of how can they live up to a much loved parent, because children, particularly boys as well, that feeling of how are they going to get to be, a boy is so small and skinny, and how are they going to get to be this great big man that they've got to grow into. So that feeling of a child looking up to a parent and loving them, but not knowing how they're going to get there. That's a very common feeling. I tapped into something there.
It sounds like you're more like the character of Fishlegs, who says at one point, "Call me fussy, but I quite fancy staying alive till I'm at least 12." Something of you in Fishlegs?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, you put yourself into a lot of the characters. Funny enough, my children say they think I'm most like Fishlegs. And Fishlegs' is slightly sarcastic voice. It's definitely slightly my voice. Yeah, so I am quite like Fishlegs, I'd say. And Fishlegs wants to be a bard in the end. He wants to be a bard, which is what I ended up being. But you put a little bit of yourself into all the characters, I think, when you're a writer.
So is Hiccup based on anyone in particular?
Well, some of the emotions of Hiccup are my emotions on looking at my father, who was very dauntless. I remember when I was about 9 years old, hanging onto my father's legs as he was hanging over the edge of a cliff to check what type of bird's nest it was at the end of the cliff. And I remember very strongly thinking, how am I related to this person? And so that emotion I put into Hiccup, that emotion. So Hiccup is like me, but he's also it's actually quite like my husband. who is the kind of person who doesn't necessarily think they're the most important person in the room.
So I'll come back to my first question. Why are you finishing it now?
I say right from the beginning, this is a story about growing up. And one of the things about growing up is that one day it has to happen. And it's telling the story of what happened to the dragon. So that's the kind of story that this is. And I think a reader would have felt cheated if you'd gone on forever. I wrote it with an ending in mind. And in fact, I'd written the ending about 7 or 8 books ago. So I think it wouldn't have felt right not to end it.
What can you tell me about the last book without, of course, giving the game away?
The last book is all about this great war between humans and dragons that has begun over the course of the series. And it's about whether or not Hiccup can intervene and prevent either the humans from being made extinct or the dragons from being made extinct. It's a big book, this book. This is the culmination of a war that has been going on for 4 years in the book. 4 books, I mean. So it's all about whether the dragons can survive.
What about the films? They've been hugely successful. We've had 2, and there's another one coming out in 2018. So do you have any hand in those?
I'm very close to the filmmakers, and so they will send me scripts, and I'm good friends with the filmmakers. It's been fascinating having a sort of ringside seat to see how movies are made, because obviously that's not I'm a book writer, that's my specialty, but I'm very close to them, and I get to see how they do it, and they get so involved in every single little detail, and they mind so much about the story. It's been a lovely relationship that we've had.
You must care deeply about the pictures because you do all your own illustrations. So how have you been able to let that go into the hands of another artist?
I think it's important, well, this is just my view, but I think it is important to let it go. I mean, of course, if people ask your opinion and they want to know what's the inspiration behind things, you give it. But I think you have to be open to the idea of other people's interpretation of your work and let it go, a bit like bringing up a kid. You have to let the kid, you have to trust the kid to go its own way. You have to trust in the creativity of other people and their own inspiration. So you don't want to be hovering over the whole thing like a discontented ghost, do you? So it's a difficult line. You have to be able to let things go a bit.
But you're very happy with the outcome.
Oh, I love the films. Thank goodness. I mean, don't you think? I absolutely love the films because they're emotional. I mean, as well as stunning and give you that feeling of wonder. I really wanted to give you that feeling of wonder at the natural world. And I think when you see the films, you do get that feeling of